私はユリアと申します。ユリアさん？私の魂をラングリッサーに捧げます。私はラングリッサーと共にみんなを見守っていきます。ユリアさん。私の名前はユリア。私の魂はラングリッサーと一体化しました。ラングリッサーは私たちを守ってくれています。聖剣ラングリッサーが打ち直されたのです。私の心はいつまでも皆さんと共にあります。あなたはラングリッサーの葬儀に来てくださったのですか？
What's up YouTube, this is Nitro. So, in this video I am going to be talking about the way to build Yulia as well as the way to build Omega. Now, before I start, I want to give special thanks to Newbie on Discord for providing a bunch of screenshots from his account on the Chinese server, and also having a brief theory crafting discussion with me about these two heroes. Now, both Yulia and Omega are incredible, which was why I keep saying that it's ideal to ignore the Sakura Wars banner that came before this banner. It may be worth drawing multiple copies of them, especially since there's always heroes you need to do shard farming on, and you may not have that much time to commit shard farming into Yulia and Omega. With that said, however, keep in mind that from here on out, the heroes are actually being released fast and furious. Just as a, let me just bring up the banner guide to March 2020 as an example of this. So, you can see right here that we just had the Claret and Illustrial banner be released. Give me a moment to just lock this down. So right there, right? Well, 4 weeks after that, which is November 21st, we're expected to get the Yulia and Omega banner. And actually, 4 weeks after that one, we're getting the limited time collaboration banner with Kurama and Yusuke, right? And you probably want to get both of them, ideally, right? Because it's a limited time collaboration. But 2 weeks after that one, you're getting the other collaboration banner, right? So with the Toguro brothers, and I truly can't pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try, right? And then 2 weeks after that second collaboration banner, you have Rainforest and Betty. Now, granted, most people skip this banner simply because they don't have any resources to draw on it, but they do come. And then 4 weeks after that, you're looking at Prime Jessica and Emilia. So 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and then 4 weeks. Look at that's all these new heroes. So it's going to be very, very tough for you to get all these heroes in truth, right? If you want to grab Yulia, one copy of her, and then grind her up, that may be the ideal method so that you can make sure you get the collaboration banner heroes, right? And then skip Rainforest and Betty, and then finally go after Prime Jessica and Emilia. And then, of course, after that, I think, is the mysterious Night banner and whatnot. But let's not go there yet, because that's all the way in, I think, March or April for International. So, you can see, lots of banners coming up, limited resources. It's going to be tough to get the characters you want. Long story short. Now, I'll also briefly mention this. If we look at the Chinese server, Season 2 winners box, which was Wylon, he actually pretty much has one character from every banner when he won the season. For example, he has Yulia from this Yulia and Omega banner in his party, right? He has, from each of the collaboration banners, he has one character, Yusuke and the guy whose name I truly can't pronounce. Hiei? Whatever. And then, as I mentioned, neither Rainforest or Betty made it to his party, but Prime Jessica did make it into his party. So he pretty much had one character from each of those upcoming banners in his party. And he did skip Claret, interestingly enough. So it can be tough to figure out who to draw for and plan it all out as a result. In any case though, with all that mentioned, let's begin talking about Yulia and the way to build her. So, to do so, I'm going to jump on to the Wikigrisser page. So just bear with me for a moment. And there we are. So, Yulia. So, what makes Yulia incredibly good? First of all, we've already had a great demonstration of Yulia's powers from the New World map battles, specifically the Spirit of Langrisser maps, battles number 2 to 5. That is where you use Yulia with pretty much her top skills and learn about how overpowered she really is. The required characters for her bonds, I've been told that for her strength bond, you need Zerida, and for her toughness bond, you actually just need the rare copy of Jessica. So you got a guaranteed toughness bond, and Zerida for the strength bond. Her best class is Blade of the Goddess, or in this case, Goddess Blade. Because that class is holy class, it's one range, but it allows her to wear heavy armor as a holy class. So it's kind of similar to Ledin in his Templar class. You can equip, you can just equip heavy armor at will. Now, her talent is basically pure insanity. Okay. First of all, when the unit's hit points is greater than a certain percentage, damage dealt is increased by a certain percentage, and also the unit cannot be defeated in one hit up to 1, 2, or 3 times in battle. And finally, after combat, you have a chance to recover hit points equals to 30% of the damage dealt by the unit. Multiple effects, absolute insanity, long story short, right? She can't be killed by a single target strike multiple times per battle. Her damage dealt is increased by 30%. She heals 30% of the damage dealt after combat. So, this talent, as I said, is pure insanity. It makes you really, really want to build Yulia. Even if you don't play her factions, which is Legion of Glory, Mythical Realm, and Princess Alliance, doesn't matter. Just build her. You know, worst comes to worst, maybe you bring someone with mass attack to give her the plus 20% attack that she'll need to do a lot of damage. In terms of her skills, well, her 1-point skill is very, very clear. The best one for her is Faith, because when actively attacking, damage dealt is increased by 15% and heal the allied unit with the lowest hit points by 2 times her intelligence. Increased damage, a free heal, why not, right? So that makes it her best 1-point skill. As for her 2-point skills, she actually has 3 good ones. The first one, and by far the most ridiculous, is Divine Might. Okay. 2 costs. The main drawback is the 5-turn cooldown. And what it does is it attacks a single target, dealing 1.6 times damage. However, before combat, you gain the effect of doing 2 times int in fixed damage to the enemy, and you heal yourself for 2 times your int. Finally, this effect lasts 2 turns, and after combat, you gain the Divine Might effect, where all enemies within 2 blocks receive -3 movement and cannot guard. Lasts 1 turn. The fact that this has a 2-block radius is already absolutely insane, right? And it's just the combination of everything. Fixed damage, self-healing before combat, right? Talent providing self-healing after combat, applying cannot guard on enemies within 2 blocks of you. It's just sheer, utter insanity. So this skill is pretty much a must bring, right? And you get to play around with this skill, in fact, in Spirit of Langrisser battles on the world map. For example, and I'm going to have Yulia move over here and use her skill, Godly Menace, to slap one of these enemies, right? And then that way, these archers can't move and have to attack Yulia. So yeah, why don't I use it to smack the infantry? Even though she has infantry, even though she has Lancer soldiers, it should be fine. Due to her self-heal ability, pretty much brought her back to full health. So that worked. And then I'm going to have the Sky Archer finish off the Infantry General this way. And I might as well just move over up and heal up Yulia to full. So that way, things look pretty good overall. So Yulia fights against the archers in melee combat and kills them both. So, in addition to Divine Might, Yulia has another incredible single target strike skill, which is Divine Judgment. Like Divine Might, it does have a 5-turn cooldown, but its effect is that it attacks a single enemy, dealing 1.6 times damage, dispels 5 buffs on the enemy before combat, and inflicts cannot act again and cannot be buffed on the target. It lasts 2 turns, and these debuffs can't be dispelled. So, in very many ways, it's kind of like a variation of Elwyn's Sword Soul, right? You're basically removing a huge number of buffs on the enemy, but rather than applying cannot be healed on the enemy, you apply cannot act again and cannot be buffed. And the craziest thing is the debuffs can't be dispelled. So it's a brutal attack skill. You know, you can wreck the enemy tanks, making them unable to do much. Her third attack skill, which may have occasional use, is the Discipline skill. And Discipline is a skill that Chris and Chloe both have, right? It's a 2-range attack skill as opposed to just 1 range, and it attacks a single enemy dealing 1.5 times damage. After combat, you restore health equals to 20% of damage dealt, and melee soldiers will also attack. So unlike those other 2 skills with the 5-turn cooldown, Discipline just has a 1-turn cooldown. So it's reasonably easy to throw out consistently. For example, you could toss out the Discipline, then switch to one of your ultimate skills, then attack with Discipline again on the following turn. And then only at that point would you be out of skills. So it's a very viable alternative if you choose to just bring one of her 2 ultimate skills and then combo that with Discipline. So you can see, she is a lot like a combination of Elwyn, Chris with Discipline, and then Divine Might is just a new skill, just an overpowered new unique skill. So she's just a godly attack hero. And that's why so many people have been saying they're going to be saving up to draw for Yulia instead of drawing on those previous banners. Now, moving on, so after her skills, let's talk about her soldiers. Now, sadly, this information isn't really on this page, but her soldiers are they're actually listed here. She gets Heavy Infantry and Amazon Champion from Goddess Blade, and from her Holy Princess class, she gets Exorcist and Templar Knights. Finally, from the training grounds, she gets Mass Maids, Heaven's Guard, and Unicorn. So in other words, she has access to infantry in Heavy Infantry and Mass Maids. She has access to Lancers from the Amazon Champion. And then she gets access to cavalry units from Heaven's Guard and Unicorn. You know, Exorcists and Templar Knights can kind of be ignored as soldiers because they're really not anything special. You don't particularly want holy soldiers as far as I'm aware. So it's just primarily you would focus on the other 5 soldiers. And also I should mention, unicorns currently don't exist in our version of the game yet, but she just gets them in the future. So she doesn't exactly have a best soldier in general, she just switches between her soldiers depending on the opponents that you're facing. Next, so I've already mentioned that her best class is without doubt the Goddess Blade class because of good amount of hit points, the same amount of intelligence, and higher defense than the Princess class. So let's move on to talk about her gear. Right? And in brief, Yulia's gear is that she is a melee intelligence-based attacker who can wear heavy armor. So you pretty much just want to maximize her intelligence and her hit points. Right? Maximizing intelligence would allow her to do more damage. Maximizing hit points would increase her survivability. So in that sense, for the weapon, I'm actually going to jump into the game first to demonstrate the best gear for her. So for the weapon, I actually don't have either version of the weapons that she uses, but the absolute best weapon for her would probably be the Queen's Scepter. Because the Queen's Scepter, while it provides less base intelligence than items like the Red Moon, it gives a maximum of 15% int increase. So that 15% int increase more than balances out the slightly less flat intelligence stat increase. So that would really be her best weapon. If you don't have a Queen's Scepter, the second choice would be the Red Moon, right? That gives the 10% int increase. If you don't have the Red Moon, then I think you move down to the Blue Moon at that point. In terms of the accessory, once again, you want to maximize your intelligence, so you're looking probably at the Holy Ring. Because most importantly, the Holy Ring grants the immunity to silence effect. And more than any other character, I think Yulia is one that you don't want to get silenced. In terms of her armor, since she can equip heavy armor, I think this is very much a situation where it's pick whichever armor you want except for the carbon fiber armor, right? Since she self-heals and so on, whatever armor you choose works. Maybe you want to do some fixed damage to the enemy if you're attacked by ranged attacks to break, let's say, sorceresses from doing full damage. Cloak of Defiance could work, right? Maybe you want Arcane Battle Garb to apply fixed damage to the enemy after you attack to guarantee the kill. That could work. Maybe you want to reduce your damage taken when you're attacked or have a chance to, which would be Aeolus's Battle Armor or Bloodline Magic Armor. Both of those would work. Or maybe you want just the simple Aeneas' Armor because that increases the heal effect and increases your defense. That could also work. So pretty much every armor. Take your pick. As for your helmet, in general, I would say for the helmet, you want to increase your survivability. So you're looking at hit point increase. So in that sense, there's 2 helmets that really fit that role. The first one would be the Aeneas' helmet with the 10% hit point increase and 5% defense. That's the one that probably increases her survivability the most. Other than Aeneas' helmet, you can also choose to use Reaper's Breath because that gives the 10% hit points. And when eliminating enemy, you can deal a debuff that deals fixed damage to the enemies, right? That can also work fine because although you're losing the 5% defense, you're gaining the ability to debuff enemies. And she's very much a character that one-shots or kills off enemy targets anyways. So Reaper's Breath can be her best helmet as well. And that pretty much covers her gear. So the final thing I will mention in this video is her enchants. Right? And enchants for Yulia is generally quite simple, I feel. You have 2 options. The first option is the tried and true Clocks enchant, right? Because she has 2 5-turn cooldown skills, bringing Clocks to allow you to use those skills 1 additional time can be huge. So That's one option. The other option, other than clocks of course, is also the tried and true mobility enhancing breeze. Because Yulia has major mobility issues since she's a infantry, well, she's a holy class infantry. She has no way whatsoever of increasing her mobility, right? There's no plus int +1 mobility accessory in the game. So you can certainly give her breeze to make sure she gets some mobility buffs to close in on the enemies more easily, right? And then depending on which enchant you use, you would change up your skill combo differently. Because likely if you use clocks, you're going to bring Divine Might and Divine Judgment. If you bring the breeze enchant, well, you're probably going to choose to bring Discipline along with one of Divine Might or Divine Judgment. And with all that said, that concludes everything I wanted to say about Yulia.
Sigma はどうだ。なぜラングリッサーはあの未完成の結界品を選ぶ。俺が本当の能力ってものを見せてやる。見てろ。これが俺の力だ。見てろ。これが俺の力だ。
So now we move on to talk about Omega. Now, frankly speaking, Omega, I don't see him as being worth grinding for. Unless you somehow got him at, let's say, 5 stars while you're drawing for Yulia. Because, well, as I mentioned, there's so many upcoming new heroes that there are better characters to bring to 6 stars than Omega. Mind you, Omega is nonetheless a great hero to use. So, let's begin by talking about the characters required for Omega's bonds. For Omega, I've had multiple confirmations from people that you need Sigma for his strength bond, and you need Lambda for his toughness bond. His best class is the Grand Commander class, which is an assassin class, because that, once again, it gives more hit points than his ranger class, has the same amount of attack, a bit more defense, and most importantly, it has more skill than his ranger class. Omega has 2 things that define him as a character. The first defining trait is his talent, right? And the talent is that the first part of the talent is pretty common. Attack and crit rate increases by a certain percentage when fighting a unit of life greater than or equal to a certain percentage. Okay? So as long as the enemy target is not basically half dead, you get increased attack and crit rates. The second part of the talent is what defines him as a character. And it's that after killing the enemy unit, you teleport back to the position before the attack would. And you can move 1, 2, or 3 spaces after that attack. So, in other words, he can attack, kill off a target, get teleported back, and then move again, as you saw in the intro video section of about Omega. So, if you missed it, I'm just going to demonstrate it one more time. So here, you will see Omega attack and kill a target, and then once the target is killed, he will teleport to his original attack location. Let's take a look. Omega one-shots the target, and then his talent activates, teleports him to where he was before he attacked, and he has the option to move 3 tiles. So, clearly, an incredible talent. And it's one of his defining aspects. The second defining aspect of Omega is his unique skill. Okay. This unique skill defines him because he continues the trend of the skill stat being the key to success. Okay. The skill is called Surprise. While not listed here, it is a 1-point passive where when the active attack enters battle, If the skill exceeds your enemy skill by 2 times, the attack ignores guard. If it exceeds the enemy skill by 3 times, you can directly attack the hero, ignoring the soldiers. In other words, the combination of this passive along with his talent means he can move up, attack any target which cannot be guarded against, kill off the target because the attack hits the hero directly, and then get teleported back to the location where you started your movement to attack, and finally retreat 3 tiles away from the enemy. So with the teleportation comboed with the retreating 3 tiles, you're probably looking at a 5 tile or 6 tile retreat after attacking, which is just crazy as well. Now, with all that said, he does have a few drawbacks. Okay. The first major drawback is his factions. He's only part of 2 factions, Meteor and Dark. The unfortunate thing about this is both of these factions only have a single faction buffer, which is Zerida for Meteor and Bozel for Dark. In other words, it's probably next to impossible to deploy Omega with a faction buff. In Apex Arena, if you play Omega first, your opponent will probably ban Zerida and Bozel next. And if you played Zerida or Bozel earlier, they're probably going to ban your Omega. So realistically, don't expect to be able to play a faction buff with him. The second drawback is his overall limited mobility. In a world with characters like Claret having 10 mobility, Zerida having 7 mobility, and Luna having 8 mobility, Omega by comparison only has 3 mobility, and comboed with the Cold Blood skill, he does get a total of 5 mobility. So when you add in the fact that he has 2 attack range rather than just 1, he has an effective 7 attack range, right? Which is a solid amount of attack range, but it's still lower than a lot of other characters. Even the Harto, who has sprint for 3 extra movement, has more mobility by 1 than Omega. So this can be a fatal flaw, having 1 less mobility than, characters who have a skill that gives +3 movement rather than +2. Nonetheless, despite these drawbacks, he's still an incredible character, capable of one-shotting enemies again and again due to him doing damage directly to the enemy hero. So, in terms of his skill combo, the best combo is likely to be, first, Surprise, because that is pretty much a must bring. It's the skill that allows him to ignore guard. Second, you probably bring Cold Blood, because this Cold Blood skill allows him to move 2 tiles when it's activated, and it also allows him to refresh the cooldown on his attack skill. Third would be the attack skill that you bring. And which attack skill you bring is kind of up to you. He has 2 of them that are good. The first one is Heartfelt, which does 1.3 times damage, and for each tile moved before battle, your skill is increased by 10%, up to a 30% increase. So comboed with Cold Blood, that's usually just a 20% skill increase, but if you don't have to use Cold Blood, you could get this to a 30% increase. Right? Other than Heartfelt, there is also the choice of Surprise, where... Sorry, not Surprise. There is also the choice of Weak Sniper. Weak Sniper also does 1.3 times damage. The difference here is, if the enemy has a debuff, you ignore 20% of the enemy defense and reduce the cooldown of this skill by 2 after the attack. Both of these skills, although not mentioned, have a 3-turn cooldown. So the fact that this one can basically have a 1-turn cooldown is a big bonus over the other one that is forced to have a 3-turn cooldown. Now, let's move on to talk about Omega's soldiers. And Omega has access to these 4 soldiers from his 2 classes: Bandits, Skeleton Knight, Hellfire Archer, and the Dark Elf Snipers. From the training ground, although not listed here, he gets access to 3 other soldiers: Leviathan, Shinobi, and Bolt Rangers. In terms of best soldiers, it's therefore kind of hard to choose amongst them, right? For example, he has access to both Shinobi and Hellfire Archers for fixed damage soldiers, right? The Dark Elf Snipers offer a 45% attack and defense increase as long as the enemy that you're attacking is at full health. And finally, there's also the choice of Bandits for the 30% increased crit rate chance, as well as the 15% increased attack. So all of those soldiers are very, very viable ones. As for the other ones, I mean, Skeleton Knight is a melee soldier, so you really don't want those. Bolt Rangers have 5 movement and they're inherently a defensive soldier, so you'd want to pass on those. And the Leviathan, they only do additional damage in water, and Omega really shouldn't be in water, right? So I would say pass on those ones as well. Next, let's move on to talking about Omega's gear. And we're going to move into Langrisser Mobile to do so. So let's just jump back into the game. For gear, Omega very much just wants a standard assassin setup, in my opinion. So that would mean Last Rites for the armor, King's Crown for the helmet. The weapon and accessory can be kind of unique though. The basic plan would probably be the Extreme Magic Bow that I don't have. Right? That gives the most attack value. However, keep this in mind. The bows only offer a 43 increase skill. By comparison, daggers, if you build them, offer a maximum of 54 skill. While daggers offer less attack, I believe daggers are capped at 96 attack and 54 skill, as opposed to 107 attack and 43 skill. That skill difference may make the difference in allowing you to be having 3 times skill over your opponents. So it might be that rather than Extreme Magic Bow, you want a weapon like a Wind Cutter Dagger that gives plus 10% attack and higher skill. This is the part that I'm uncertain about because Omega's not in the game right now and I can't see how much skill you can pile onto him. So something to keep in mind. As for the accessory, I actually favor Overlord's Badge on Omega for the very same reason. Overlord's Badge gives all stats plus 5%, and that 5% includes skill. Right? If you use the standard attack increasing one, like Slayer's Emblem, you only get the 8% attack increase but no skill increase. So that's why Overlord's Badge may just be his best accessory. You're giving up, in other words, you're basically giving up 3% attack for 5% skill. Finally, let's talk about Omega's enchants. Now, this part is another part where I'm not entirely sure about because of the way he works, right? You absolutely need to 100% kill off your opponent so you can retreat with Omega. If you fail to kill, he's basically dead and you've lost a character for no reason. So, in terms of enchants, his best enchants might actually be either Blazing Sun for the crit damage increase of 25% and increased crit rate, or Meteor for the, once again, crit chance 7%, and as long as the unit you're attacking has hit points above 60%, you do 20% additional damage. Right? So these two may be his best enchants. Right? However, it may work to use Breeze on him as well. With Breeze, you definitely have a less of a crit rate, but Breeze, as always, gives the chance of additional mobility. And I mentioned already how Omega does have less mobility than a lot of other characters. So Breeze could potentially work on him. And finally, if you're not worried about the mobility issue, you may even consider Full Moon. Because Full Moon gives all offensive and defensive stats increase of 10%. Now, because it's only offensive and defensive stats, skill is not increased here. But the plus 15% attack may actually lead to more damage than plus 20% damage. So that's just... So which one you choose can be tough, right? But with all that said, these are pretty much the options for Omega's enchants. So that concludes this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this information useful. And on that note, Nitro out.